Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Roskilly. I'm Professor of Energy Systems at Durham University, and I lead the EPSRC network for hydrogen-fueled transportation. It's a series of webinars that we've been running as part of the network to cover all the different aspects associated with hydrogen research and development work in the transport sector. So this week we are welcoming two speakers who will present the challenges of hydrogen storage and accelerating the take-up of hydrogen for transport. So I would like to introduce our second speaker, Fiona Landy. Fiona has been leading on the Scottish Cities Alliance hydrogen strategy for the last 6 years and have led a number of submissions, many submissions that Aberdeen and Dundee City Councils are partners in. She is also supporting Glasgow City Council on their decarbonisation of heavy fleet vehicles from the launch of their fleet strategy utilising hydrogen technologies. Fiona has been seconded for the last 6 months to the Transport Scotland's Low Carbon Economy Directorate to accelerate hydrogen activities across the public sector. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you very much. Just before I do the introduction, so I was part of Transport Scotland to actually support them in their hydrogen work, but now I've joined the Hydrogen Accelerator, which I'll explain in a minute. Okay, thank you. I'm the delivery manager at the Hydrogen Accelerator. The Hydrogen Accelerator was a commitment by the Scottish Government in their Programme for Government 2019 to actually set up this organisation to do what it actually says. And in the title, it is about the acceleration of hydrogen technologies. And the Scottish Government really wants to position itself as not only an early adopter of the technology, but also a world leader within the sector. So there's 4 mission statements for us in particular, and it's really learning from projects of the past about how we can facilitate as an organisation in terms of supporting the public and private sectors to bring their products to market, to look at developing models with the total cost of ownership, particularly for the public sector, which is really difficult for them in terms of justifying the actual price increase when they're looking at the deployment of hydrogen technologies, and how we can look at the hydrogen refueling infrastructure, really scaling up the opportunity for green hydrogen production both on and offshore, working with companies to try and maximise their opportunities, for that green hydrogen production and where we can export it as well. Really looking at economic analysis that we've done for a number of local authorities as well. And also is that outreach and communications piece, particularly with the general public, for them to understand what the hydrogen sector is all about, to dispel the myths around Hindenburg and all the rest of it that you always hear. And also it's around that health and safety aspect as well. Really, really key that anything that we deploy in Scotland or anywhere else in the UK for that matter is fit for purpose, and that we start to scale up types of vehicles and decarbonisation of industry, for instance, as well, utilising hydrogen. So we actually are hosted by the University of St Andrews under the leadership of Professor John Irvine, who many of you will know. So John is our chair, and we have Dr. Jerry Agnew, who is our director. We work in partnership, so very much with the academics from the University of St Andrews in terms of their expertise in fuel cells and batteries and hydrogen, for instance, and then in partnership with the University of Strathclyde, so very much around that engineering sector. So we're funded through Transport Scotland, so we do have quite a focus on the transport sector. However, we still, do engage with other industries, such as the chemical industry as well, in their decarbonisation strategies. Obviously, we're cross-cutting across the academic sector, industry, public, and the research institutes as well. So this is our challenging timeline that we have in Scotland out to 2045. So one of the key sectors is the public sector. And as you can see, it is to try and dissuade the uptake of petrol and diesel vehicles into the council's captive fleets by 2025, which is really, really challenging, as you can see. So we're very focused on supporting that particular sector in how we can actually help them to decarbonise, utilising hydrogen technologies. So looking at the total cost of ownership models, looking at joint procurement, looking at the vehicles that are fit for purpose, but also working with companies such as Scottish Power, SSE, and new entrants, H2 Green, in providing that hydrogen refueling infrastructure at scale. So trying to get that balance between the scale of hydrogen production, but also the offtake. I'll show you a number of the projects that we're involved with as well, so you can see that it's quite cross-cutting. So we've been supporting Transport Scotland, and particularly the Rail Directorate, in their decarbonisation strategy. So they launched strategy back in July 2020 to actually start to look at how they're going to decarbonise the rail sector in Scotland. And you'll see from this map on the west side of the country, all the green lines, and then the yellow lines as well on the east side from Aberdeen up to Inverness. These lines are not being looking to actually electrify those particular lines. So there is an opportunity there to actually deploy fuel cell electric trains, and obviously then the hydrogen refueling infrastructure. So during the time I was with Transport Scotland, secured some funding for the phase 2 development of a fuel cell electric train. So that was working in partnership with Scottish Enterprise. So we secured the funding, and ScotRail had a train available. It was a class 314, it's about 40 years old. We're happy for it to be donated or sold for £1 to any organisation that could actually utilise that train to actually do the development. So John Irvine, which we're very grateful for, offered to actually purchase that train. And then we went out to tender, and Arcado Energy, who's now Ballard Motive Solutions, won that tender along with partners Arup and ARC and Aegis to actually develop this train. So we've been working with them over the last couple of years in its development. And this is the inside of the train, you can see there. All that work has been going on at the Bowness Scottish Heritage Railway line. And the top right-hand corner, you will see some of the engineers there that are actually based at the Bowness line. These are retired engineers from the rail sector, so we are very privileged to have their wealth of knowledge in developing this train. And during this phase of the project, Angel Trains, which is a rolling stock asset management company, have secured the funding for us to actually develop this refueling infrastructure, which is also based at the Bowness line, so which we're very, very grateful for have that as well. So during the time that this train has been under development, Ballard have also increased their employment by another 40 staff. So you just see how we are starting now to develop the opportunities for high value jobs and skills, and also looking at how we enhance our supply chain. So we carried out a number of workshops last year, and it became very obvious to us within the supply chain that all the high value componentry is not manufactured anywhere in Scotland or in the UK for that matter. It comes very much from the Far East, which you'll all understand that. But there is an opportunity there as a market failure that we could start to look at what supply chain developments we can be doing in Scotland and in the UK. And especially in Scotland with the oil and gas sector, how we can use their skills and expertise within this sector. And I'm pleased to say that through this project, we have 5 local companies that are now involved in lots of the activities in actually developing this particular train. So hopefully we're going to be trialling that train on the Wick-Verso line later on this year, carrying out a lot of public consultation days as well, but also working key with our stakeholders, such as ScotRail, Network Rail, and also the trade unions. So really important to have that consortia also involved with this particular project. So another project that we've been involved with, so I've been working with Highland Council for a number of years in terms of their ambitions for the hydrogen deployment in linking both the islands and the mainland. So really large scale production of hydrogen, and also looking right across the different transport modes, looking at the ferries, looking at the trains, looking at those light aircrafts, and obviously the heavy road vehicles as well. So very much around that sector coupling. So you might have seen recently that H2 Green have signed a memorandum of understanding with Highland Council to look at rolling out hydrogen hubs across Highlands, which is, it's good to see a new entrant coming into the fore as well. And obviously all the work that's going on with Cromarty as well, looking at the distilleries along with Scottish Power. So there's some really exciting projects starting to come to the fore. It's really good to see. Again, within Glasgow, you may have seen the press release from Scottish Power and ITM Power about them actually working together to deploy electrolyser at Scottish Power's largest wind farm, Whiteley. It's probably the largest one in Europe. Again, it's really great to see that these companies come into the fore to really start to scale up that production of green hydrogen. And then obviously we have that challenge about where the offtake is going to be. But that really helps us when we're looking at projects like the train, for instance, that we have got that comfort that we will have large-scale production of hydrogen. And then again, linking that with road transport and other sectors that could utilise that hydrogen as well. During my time when I was in Transport Scotland, I secured the funding for the development of this refuse collection vehicle with Glasgow City Council. And what's really important about what we're trying to do here is about that local supply chain. It's what companies do we have in Scotland that can work in partnership to develop these heavy fleet vehicles. So that particular vehicle was designed and built by Ballard Motive Solutions in partnership with Farrad Hill End, who supplied the body. So on the back of that refuse collection vehicle, Glasgow City Council will be deploying a further 25. And again, this gives us the opportunity to work with other local authorities, because refuse collection vehicles are the jewel in the crown for any of them, and start to have a different way of thinking about how we utilise these vehicles. Can we get a commonality across the chassis? And working with certain OEMs. This one is a DAF, and Dennis Eagle, again, really interested in working in this sector to really start to try and drive down the cost of these vehicles to make them much more affordable for local authorities. And if we can start to develop models like vehicles as a service, where you can look at leasing options where you have your hydrogen refueling infrastructure and the actual vehicles as well coming together. Under the leadership of Eric Stewart, who was brought in specifically by Glasgow City Council to develop their decarbonisation strategy, he's been looking at ways of actually doubling up the shifts of these vehicles because of their high utilisation and optimisation. So really started to think how better you can drive down the number of these types of vehicles you have in your fleets because of using fuel cell electric technologies. So looking at another project that we have been working on, this is Michelin Scotland Innovation Park. It was the Michelin factory. Sadly, Michelin decided to close down that factory with a loss of over 850 jobs. So the Scottish Government has been really supporting the development of the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park and looking at its utilisation going forward. So it's now been earmarked as the home for sustainable transport in Scotland. And we work very closely with Michelin Scotland Innovation Park, particularly John Irvine, looking at their Skills Academy, for instance. So we've actually launched another project that we've been leading on, and that's the powertrain test facilities that will be actually launched next year at these premises as well. Again, this is around powertrain testing for heavy niche vehicles. So you do all the off-road testing actually within this controlled environment. So we have put out a tender and for the actual equipment for this test centre, and that was won by AVL, who are leading experts within this particular field. So really great to have them involved as well. So it's all niche applications as well. So if you're looking at off-road transport, that's another sector that we can work with. And also looking at other sectors, not over the road transport, but looking at marine applications going forward, for instance, that could also utilise this particular technology. Another project that we are leading on as well is looking at freight. The freight sector, obviously, looking at decarbonisation. And if you're looking at those big 44-ton vehicles, for instance, they need that security that they would have that hydrogen available, for refueling when they are travelling across the country and down into England. So we have been working with Ballard to develop a feasibility study, secured funding through Innovate UK, the report will be fed back to the Department for Transport, to understand what are the opportunities for the freight sector in terms of their decarbonisation plans. We have partners such as Scottish Power, Scottish Water, and the wholesale sector and forestry sector are part of this programme as well. So as I say, we've actually submitted our findings back to Innovate UK and to DFT, and we're hoping that we will be able to secure some funding to actually roll out a whole fleet programme for about 30 vehicles over the coming year or so and do all those developments. So you'll see also we've actually started to look at across all different regions in Scotland where you need that high utilisation of hydrogen refueling infrastructure and hubs across the whole of Scotland. And that's very much part of this project, but also for other work that we're doing in regional assessments, which I'll talk about in a second. This is Angus Rural Mobility Hub. So part of our work with Transport Scotland and with regional transport partners, TACTRANS, we are looking at a regional assessment of the possibilities for both public and private sectors to utilise the hydrogen refueling infrastructure and the offtake in terms of buses and trucks and other types of vehicle applications across the region. And within doing that is looking at the actual total cost of ownership models, as I spoke about earlier on, and how we can really support both public and private sectors to make that transition and really start to drive down the costs of those actual vehicles as well. Again, working with Ballard Motive Solutions, we've been looking at the refuse collection vehicles, for instance, with local authorities, but also the construction vehicles, like the gritters that are utilised as well by public and private sector organisations. So really fantastic opportunity there to really start to really deploy vehicles at scale, learning from projects of the past where they were quite small and novel, really important as they were. We now have to start to really scale up the opportunities. So what's the next phase for us in the Hydrogen Accelerator? You'll hear from the just transition that the Scottish Government will speak about. That just transition from a fossil fuel economy to a green economy is in supporting those jobs that we have, like in the oil and gas sector that I spoke about earlier on. We need to protect those jobs, the skills and the expertise that we have within that sector. Obviously, they're used to dealing with hydrogen and high pressure gases. So we really have got a big opportunity there. But also it's building up that Scottish capability. It is about creating those high value jobs and that inward investment. And in the hydrogen sector, it is all about collaboration and coordination, to actually bring the right consortia together to really make sure that we absolutely capitalise on the opportunities that we have in Scotland in terms of that green production of hydrogen, but also about those supply chain development and that the transport sector to really transition, and it's all about that utilisation. Shovel-ready projects, really important when we're looking at funding. We're not a funding body ourselves, but we do want to support, particularly the public sector, to have shovel-ready projects ready that they can actually capitalise on funding opportunities that come through. Obviously, we continue to support companies in their missions to net zero, but also, again, it's really trying to support Scotland to be at the forefront of technical opportunities, but also as a key exporter of green hydrogen across different countries as well. And that's the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Very interesting. Cover a lot of different projects there and activity.